Season 1, Episode 1 of The Wire does something that a lot of pilot episodes never manage to do. It introduces a whole world without trying to flatter the audience, without trying to make itself instantly lovable, and without trying to simplify anything just to make the ride smoother. It throws you into Baltimore like the city has been moving long before you arrived and like it will keep moving after you leave. That is what makes the first episode so powerful. It does not feel like a beginning in the usual television sense. It feels like you opened a door and walked into a system that was already alive, already broken, already tired, and already teaching people how to survive inside it. That is why the first episode matters so much. It is not just setting up a crime story. It is teaching you how to look at the world of The Wire. The opening scene tells you almost everything you need to know. A man is dead, and the conversation around his death is strangely calm. The story about Snot Boogie is funny at first, almost absurd, because it is built around a man who always steals from the same street dice game and always gets chased, beaten, and then allowed back. That sounds ridiculous until the point becomes clear. They let him play because it is his turn too. Because the game has rules, even when the people in it do not deserve mercy. Because the street has its own logic, and that logic is often stronger than common sense. That small story is really the whole show in miniature. People keep being allowed back into games that will eventually destroy them. They know what will happen, everyone else knows what will happen. But the system keeps running anyway. In The Wire, that is not just true for hustlers on the corner. It is true for cops, judges, politicians, witnesses, dealers, addicts, and working men. Everybody is stuck inside something bigger than themselves, and everybody keeps going back to the table. Then the episode begins widening its view, and what becomes clear almost immediately is that this is not a show about good people hunting bad people. It is about institutions shaping behavior. Even in the first hour, The Wire refuses the easy version of a cop show. Jimmy McNulty looks like the natural lead at first because he is smart, restless, and already poking at something bigger than he is supposed to. In a simpler show, that would make him the clean hero. But The Wire does not really believe in clean heroes. McNulty is observant, and he cares, at least in his own way, but he is also reckless, arrogant, and moved by ego as much as justice. When he brings the Barksdale problem to the judge, it feels admirable on one level, because he is trying to expose something the department is ignoring. But it also feels dangerous, because you can already sense that McNulty is not a man who knows how to leave things alone. He needs to pull at loose threads. He needs to prove that he sees what others do not. In The Wire, that kind of instinct can be useful, but it can also make a mess of everything around it. That is one of the pilot's smartest moves. It introduces the audience to police work through a man who is competent enough to see the truth but flawed enough to become part of the problem. McNulty is not some pure voice of justice entering a corrupt world. He is a damaged piece inside a damaged machine. He embarrasses his superiors, he creates pressure, and he forces movement, but none of that means he is above the system. In fact, the deeper truth of The Wire is that even the men who think they are fighting the machine are still trapped inside its design. McNulty does not stand outside Baltimore. He belongs to it. He is one more person whose talents are constantly tangled up with self-destruction. The courtroom scenes are another great example of how the episode works. D'Angelo Barksdale's murder case is not presented like the downfall of a monster. It is presented like a process, almost routine, and that is what makes it unsettling. The witness changes her story, the legal machinery bends, and everyone who understands what really happened is forced to watch the lie settle into place like dust. D'Angelo clearly has blood on his hands, but what matters even more is the ease with which the system fails to touch him. That failure does not come from one dramatic act of evil. It comes from pressure, fear, silence, missing pieces, and people learning what happens when they tell the truth in the wrong place. The courtroom is supposed to represent order, but in this episode it already feels compromised. The law exists, but it does not land cleanly. It is present, but weak. That is one of the first major lessons the episode gives you. Institutions are not powerful just because they have titles, offices, and procedures. They are only as strong as the people willing to make them work, and in Baltimore, many of those people are tired, compromised, scared, or more interested in career survival than justice. That brings us to the police department, which the episode paints with brutal honesty. The people above McNulty do not seem energized by the thought that an organized drug empire has built itself in plain sight. They seem annoyed. That matters. In most crime dramas, the discovery of a larger criminal network would be treated like an exciting challenge. Here it is treated like paperwork, embarrassment, and political inconvenience. The higher-ups are not blind exactly. They are worse than blind. They understand enough to know that a real investigation means real work, real risk, bad numbers, angry bosses, and attention they do not want. That is the real sickness. The Wire identifies from the start. The problem is not just that crime exists. The problem is that institutions begin organizing themselves around managing appearances instead of solving realities. Once that happens, truth itself becomes inconvenient. Lieutenant Daniels enters that world in a very interesting position. In the first episode, he is not yet fully defined, but what stands out is the tension around him. He is given a detail that no one truly wants to exist, and he has to manage down from above and across from below at the same time. He is immediately in a squeeze. That is classic, The Wire. Nobody gets introduced in a vacuum. Every important person arrives already under pressure. Daniels is not simply a boss leading a team, he is a man being tested from all sides, and the episode smartly keeps some mystery around him. You do not yet know exactly how much spine he has, how ambitious he is, how compromised he might be, or how far he will go. But that uncertainty is part of the point. In The Wire, everyone has a file, a history, a vulnerability, and a set of private calculations. Nobody is simple. On the other side, the Barksdale organization is shown with the same kind of care. Avon is not front and center in the way a lesser show would present its main villain. In fact, that is part of what makes him feel powerful. He is not loud, not over-explained, not built up through speeches. He is mostly a presence, a center of gravity. The streets move around him. The name carries weight before the man fully does. And Stringer Bell, even in these early moments, feels different from the usual right-hand man in crime stories. He is calmer, more disciplined, more thoughtful. The show is already hinting that this organization is not held together by random violence alone. It is structured, businesslike, and strategic. That is why the police, being unaware of its scale, feels so damning. This is not chaos they are failing to control. It is order they failed to notice. D'Angelo is perhaps the most revealing figure in the pilot because he sits right at the intersection of family, crime, fear, and disappointment. He has status because of blood, but he is also exposed because of it. He is not a hardened kingpin, at least not yet. He feels like someone trying to play a role that is bigger than him, or maybe older than him, and the episode lets you feel that tension. He has done something brutal, but he does not yet carry himself with the settled confidence of a true predator. That makes him important. The Wire is obsessed with the way institutions recruit people into identities. D'Angelo is not just a criminal. He is a man being shaped into one by loyalty, expectation, and family gravity. He belongs to the Barksdale world, but he does not wear it as naturally as someone like Stringer or Avon. That discomfort becomes a quiet source of tension from the very beginning. The corner kids matter too, and the pilot is careful not to treat them as background decoration. Wallace, Bodie, and Poot are not yet fully explored, but they already feel alive. That is one of the things The Wire does better than almost any show. It understands that the boys on the edge of the frame are not just there to make the setting look authentic. They are the setting. They are the future products of the system. They are learning rules before they are old enough to question them. They joke, they watch, they run errands, they absorb danger as normal life. The episode never stops to make a speech about lost youth or urban tragedy. It does something smarter. It simply shows how early the game begins. Once you see that, you understand that the violence and loyalty of this world are not random traits. They are learned behaviors, passed down like trade knowledge. Kima Greggs also stands out because she immediately brings a different kind of energy. She's serious, capable, and connected to the street in a way some of the others are not. What matters about her early presence is that she helps show there is real police work buried under all the institutional laziness. The department is not made up entirely of fools or cowards. There are people who can actually do the job. But the tragedy is that competence alone is not enough. A good detective in a broken system does not automatically create good outcomes. That is one of the harshest truths in the episode. Talent exists on both sides. Smart cops exist. Smart dealers exist. Hard workers exist. Loyal people exist. But the institutions around them twist what those qualities can accomplish. One of the pilot's greatest strengths is tone. It is patient without being slow, and serious without becoming stiff. It trusts the viewer to catch up. That trust is rare. The episode does not over-explain its slang, its hierarchy, or its politics. It lets conversations breathe. It lets faces carry meaning. It lets confusion sit there for a second. That choice is important because it makes the world feel real. Real institutions do not pause to explain themselves to newcomers. They just function in front of you, and you learn by watching. The Wire understands that realism is not just about using accurate details. It is about refusing to translate every detail into easy television language. The first episode respects the complexity of its own world, and that respect is one of the reasons the whole series becomes so powerful. The title, The Target, is also more interesting the more you think about it. At first glance, the target seems obvious. It is the Barksdale organization, or maybe specifically Avon, or maybe the murder case that sparks the investigation. But the episode quietly suggests that targeting in this world is never so clean. D'Angelo was a target in the courtroom, but the witness became a target too. The Barksdale crew is a target for the police, but the police themselves become targets of departmental anger once they cause trouble. McNulty aims at a criminal empire, but he also paints a target on his own back by embarrassing command. Even the city itself feels like a target drained by neglect, pressure, and decay. In The Wire, to be noticed is often to be endangered. Visibility is rarely a gift. What makes the first episode special in the end is that it understands corruption not as individual villainy, but as environment. Nobody needs to give a big speech explaining why Baltimore is broken. You can see it in how witnesses behave, in how cops dodge work, in how dealers organize corners, in how judges react, and how everybody already knows more than they are willing to officially admit. The city is full of knowledge and empty of resolution. Everybody sees part of the truth. Almost nobody can act on all of it. That is why the pilot feels heavy even when very little by normal television standards has happened. The drama is not only in action, it is in recognition. The audience begins realizing how many people are living inside arrangements they did not fully create and do not know how to escape. And that is really the core of episode 1. It is about systems teaching people their size. McNulty learns that seeing the truth does not mean he can control it. Daniels learns that leadership inside a bureaucracy is already compromised. D'Angelo learns that family can protect you while also trapping you. The corner boys learn that the game goes on whether people deserve another turn or not. The witness learns that truth can cost more than lies. The department learns that real police work is a political problem. The audience learns that this is not a show about winning. It is a show about how games keep going. That is why the pilot of The Wire lands so hard. It does not seduce you with style alone, even though it has style. It does not beg for sympathy, even though it is full of pain. It does not pretend there is one main villain whose defeat will clean up the mess. Instead, it gives you something colder and more honest. It gives you a city where every institution has learned to survive by accepting failure as routine. And inside that city, people keep waking up, doing their jobs, playing their roles, telling themselves small stories about why this time might be different, and then stepping right back into the same machinery. Season 1, Episode 1 is not just the beginning of a plot. It is the opening statement of the entire series. The Wire is telling you from the very start that the real subject is not crime, and not even policing. The real subject is organized human behavior. It is the way systems outlive individuals. It is the way roles swallow personalities. It is the way people become loyal to games that humiliate, use, and eventually discard them. Snot Boogie keeps coming back to the dice game until the game finally decides it has had enough of him. That is Baltimore in miniature. That is the police department. That is the drug trade. That is the tragedy humming underneath the whole show. The game keeps letting people in, and the game keeps killing them, and still the game goes on.